Hello. Thank you guys for joining. If you're just watching on YouTube, it'll be about 3 minutes, 4 minutes before we get started with real content. So if you're watching this later, you might want to skip a couple minutes ahead. Like I said, we'll probably get started here. I don't know, 12:03, 12:04, something like that. Kind of give people a moment to kind of pile in. If they got questions, put them in the chat. Give me a moment to do my spiels. Um, yeah. Oh, we already got one in the chat. Thank you very much. Quick question. How can I make a text field or any field non-editable in form? Got it. No problem at all. We'll start with that one. We will start with that one. We'll get started here in about, at this point, maybe 2 minutes, 12:03. I just like kind of giving people a moment to kind of pile in with the audio connect, all that stuff. But we will certainly start with that question right there. Question two. Yep, we got that one as well. Thank you. So we'll get started here, like I said, in about 60 seconds at this point. Yeah, I'll rope both of those into the same answer. Thank you for the questions. I always appreciate having something to talk about. And thank you for joining every day. It's nice to have a little community of people checking in, kind of lunching and learning together. In the next 60 seconds or so before I get started on the questions, I just want to reiterate the kind of same stuff we talk about all the time. Um, we have a YouTube channel. It's on the top right. The easiest way to find it is to go to YouTube and type in decision support. So it looks something like this in this world over here. Oh, there we go. Nope. Come on, buddy. There it is. We've got some new stuff. Gregory's been making stuff. We got all the lunch and learns from past. Get text from PDF 9.3, the modernized updates. We're always, we are always putting out new stuff. So just that YouTube channel is great for you. Another thing that people might not know about, um, yeah, Smith, we got all four. Appreciate you. And that doesn't have to be your last one, by the way. You can say last question, but you can ask as many as you want. I just want to just reiterate, we also have the forum, which is a great spot. So if you get yourself stuck and you say, hey, maybe I want to learn more about exposed pages, you might be able to find something in that world. Obviously, I typed in the wrong thing, but um, lots of stuff on here in various iterations. So just be aware we have the support form, great option for you as well. But let's go ahead and get started. We are at 12:03, which is what I said. We'll get started about 3 minutes after. So, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you as we always do. I think I got, the questions pretty locked in. So the questions just for everybody, just I'll read them out loud for everyone that wants to know. We got a couple of them. How can we make a text field or any field non-editable in a form? That's number one. Number two, how can we add validation to fields in a form? We have multiple fields on the form and hence need to validate all of the conditions. Also, how can we display these validations? We'll talk about that. Is there a tooltip to display instructions on the form? We'll talk about that. And then how can we expose pages to users? So I might need a little clarity on the last one, but I think we cross that road when we get there. Um, just for clarification, on your form, you just want to make it so it's locked in. They can't make a change to it. Is that correct?
Yes, we are using I think the Lunch and Learn was very helpful, and one of you helped me with that inline edit kind of thing. I use that functionality in our project. It works great for updates. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Perfect. Glad to
and
hear.
when and when we were using that, we too realized when we are providing update, right? So we want some of the text fields to display the data and not necessarily edit those.
Yeah. So you're gonna have a number of options on that. I am on version 8 for the time being, just because I am working on some 8 content. So apologies if you are on 9, but the workflow and procedural process should really be the same here. Um, we'll make this at root, just making a quick folder because I've been working on this loan origination thing. All right, great. So let's start. I'm going to start with the flow, just kind of as a parent flow, and I'm going to have this absorb all of your questions. Um, flow concepts. Look at that. Boom. Love to see it. And for anyone else in the chat, feel free to go ahead and add questions whenever you're at. We can start putting some eyes on it. But when it comes to the first question, forms, again, depending on how you're doing it, you got a handful of options. Um, but let's just call this form something specific here. Item purchase form, just because I don't like naming everything the same thing over and over and over again. The path of least resistance for the text box so that you cannot edit it. Let's call this done. Okay. So I have a text box here. In its current iteration, it will be editable. I'm going to go ahead and pre-populate that form with some data, I believe. Oh, sorry. Text form. I got to actually add a data name here. Let's say item to buy, right? This is a fake purchase request thing. I'll add a label to it too, just to make it nice and clean. Item to purchase, something like that, right? So, and this might not apply to your actual use case with using actual form flows, and we can gladly walk down that path. But just for anyone else in the chat who might want to know the answer in the simplest capacity, starting kind of at the grassroots level, if I pre-populate this by using a constant, something like it's item to buy, laptop, and then run this flow, they will be able to edit it right now. So if I go start debugging, oh, I can edit that, right? Change what I want. However, on most of the form fields, or sorry, most of these toolbox items, you will be able to scroll down here to behavior and turn off the option for enabled. Although that word enabled is different than edited, it's going to work in a similar capacity. So if I turn this initially enabled off, and again, you can also have this be fed in from flow data. So you can have something previously in the flow determine whether or not these things can be editable. But again, that's kind of a more niche use case. But notice how if I turn off initially enabled and I hit save, and then I run that same flow again, I cannot change this at all. It's just locked in there. And it's gray iteration. Um, another option might be is, if you want it to be a little bit of a smoother option, you say, yeah, maybe rather than using a text box, um, let's swap this right here. Label to pre-populate. And from here, we can get the text from data name. We can call this label to pre-populate. And now, rather than it being a text box that kind of has that gray hue outline to it, it might be a little bit more of a clean option for you there. Apple Computer, not editable, but it doesn't necessarily look like a grayed out box, but you still are able to get that information dynamically in that capacity. So, does either of those options answer that question for you, or do you want a deeper dive down into some other iteration?
It's great. The only for the app computer, when you use that mode, right, we can still choose data from the flow, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I can
Okay.
say, yeah, on here, rather than putting Apple Computer, let's just
Okay,
do flow
perfect.
data. Yeah. And just say, I want to put, my
Whatever.
email. Yeah. Same concept.
This is
Perfect.
great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thanks for the great question. All right. So that's question number one. We'll move on to question number two. How can I add validations to fields in a form? We have multiple fields on the form and hence need to validate all of the conditions. How can we display these conditions? The path of least resistance, in my opinion, is going to be something along the lines of an active form flow. You have other options outside of active form flows that might be able to help you out, but for the most part, it's really going to live in that active form flow kind of space. So if I create an active form flow, you're given unique steps in that active form flow. So if I add one here, let's just call this, well, let me add some more fields here actually. let me add some fields so we actually can put some validations on there and it's not such a hypothetical. Um, let's say, well, I'll put a number box in here and say, how many, right? Um, just so we have some actual fields here. And I can show you how to set multiples at one time as well using that methodology. Cool. Active form flows, add. You can have them run a startup, which it just runs automatically. However, if you're using stuff that you're going to want to clear, you might want to have a trigger. So with active form flows, as I'm sure some of you may know, you have these triggers that trigger the flow to run. So I can say, I want to adjust whenever the how many number box, the value is changed, I want to run this flow. So active form flow for validations, just for simplicity. So this flow gets run. You can create logic. So let's say greater than, just for simplicity. And um, I can take data from my flow that would be present under flow data, or sorry, form data. Apologies, too many F's. I can say form data, and then I have an option for all of the things that are on that form. So labels, buttons, number box is what I'm going to go with, and I'm going to go with the value. Um, and is that value greater than 50? Might take a little bit of troubleshooting here because sometimes I get these mixed up. But the unique part of these active form flows is you have these steps for validations. So you have these four right there: clear all, clear multiple, clear, or set. Um, so let's go with set and clear. A thing to remember is that whenever you set validations, you're always going to want to give them options to clear those validations. Um, you can clear all validations, just clear specific ones. We're going to do clear specific ones. You'll notice here that on clear all validations, there's not really many control options over here on the properties panel because it just clears all of them. So that's kind of another smaller use case. But if I click this clear validations, I'm given options to specify which particular validations I want to clear. So if that number is greater than 50, I'm going to set some validations. And if it's less than 50, I'm going to clear them. Um, and how these work is you pick the form control that you want to have the validation pop up on, and then you can set the validation issues here. So this is a kind of a weird input option, but you'll notice here that at, once I kind of click on this stuff, form control, I can say, okay, which form control do I want that validation to show up on? I can go to form data and the how many number box. And then it says validation issues. Now this, you might say like, oh, how do I fill this out? The easiest way is to make it a constant. And when you do that, you can click add and it gives you this kind of great, easy to kind of navigate validation box. So a warning is going to give you a warning like in yellow, but they can still proceed. So you might say, hey, just you put less than 50. Are you sure about that? They can still submit it. Fatal, hey, you put less than 50. No chance you're submitting this. You're not allowed. Um, so the number, I kind of forgot which path I'm on here. True, greater than. Okay. The number of items must be less than 50, right? And a convenient thing you can do here with the set validations is you can actually add more validations. So you can set up more than just that initial validation uh, per kind of path. And then when I get to this clear validations, again, whenever you set validations, you're always going to need the option to clear them. Otherwise, they're going to have to close out of the form in totality and come back in, which is not a very good user experience. So back to it, it is the how many number box, something along these lines. So again, if I can hit OK. Another thing to remember, I'm sure everyone has uh, fell into this before, but just remember when you're editing an active form flow, click OK. Don't click the X at top because that will close you out without saving it potentially. And then you built that active form flow for no reason. Or at least it's not going to be there. That flow will still exist in the background and you can specify it, but just be aware that I make that mistake all the time. So now when I debug, if I type in how many, if I type in 610, I get that validation. The number of items must be less than 50. But then if I readjust that number, right, because we need to have the option to clear it, that validation goes away. So does that answer your question, or do you want some more depth on the multiple field section?
If I'm having multiple fields there, so where do I add validation to all those fields? And uh, in
So you might have multiple fields. Can you tell me
yeah,
like a specific use case of like
like
they don't put
simple
a
thing
certain
like
number in at everything? Yeah, go ahead. Apologies.
yeah, like for you have like you have the name and then you have like rates or something like that, right? So the
Hmm.
rates, everything, there'll be multiple fields which have to be the rates have to be greater than say 2 or something like that. And then the other thing is there's a text field. You don't want the user to enter numbers there. 0 to 9 is invalid.
Yeah. What I might recommend if you want to have individualized messages just for keeping yourself organized,
Mm-hmm.
you have a handful of options there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, sorry, validations. Let's go with clear all validations down this path. But what I might recommend for keeping yourself organized, rather than having one step that kind of does it all, you can set multiple validations on that path. And if someone else in the chat has maybe a side opinion on that, um, feel free to let me know. But again, so like I could say if this number is less than 50, I can still set validations and I can say on the form control now, let's say I want to go to that form data and that label to pre-populate where it shows my fake email address. Although that this number didn't need 50, I can still say constant and I can add this and say, hey, a fatal message saying, this is your email. You are the one who needs to fix this problem. So I have two validation paths on there. I'm still setting two validations, similar methodology. Again, hitting OK rather than clicking the X up here. Um, saving this and then running debug.
It's not on the same box, sorry. It's on different text boxes. That's what I meant. Two
Yeah,
different inputs.
yeah. So when I did
Okay.
this, like if I put 600 here, it gives me two validations.
Okay.
Do you want me to go back and show you how I did that, or does that not answer your question?
What I was hoping is like there are two input text boxes and I need to validate both of them separately and um, you know g- g- display the message. Like if you just add another input
Yeah,
box
yeah,
kind of
sure, no
thing.
problem at all. Yeah, so let's say how item purchase, how many, and then we'll call this like need by date or something like that. Is
Yeah,
that fine?
anything. Yeah,
Will that be a date box? Is it okay if I change this text box to a date
sure.
box just
Yeah,
for
anything is fine. Great. No
continuity?
worries.
Yeah.
But when you were validating, right, it should validate even if the first condition is true. Even if 50 satisfies, it should still go on and validate the next one. And it would do
Yeah,
that, right?
you definitely can set it up that way. You're going to get yourself into this position where you're going to have um, multiple paths that might have multiple iterations because you kind of get into
Mm-hmm.
this, you might get into this kind of in the journey of the person who fills out the form, it's going to end up branching out into options, and then your active form flow is going to end up looking like something like this, where you're kind of going this way and checking this, and every time this value gets changed, it reruns the flow. If I personally was in your shoes and I was
Mm-hmm.
doing this method, what I personally would do is just set it up as two different active form flows, where each active form flow is going to control each thing.
Ah, okay, got you.
So
Okay.
I might call it another one, call this date validation.
Mm-hmm.
And the trigger is going to be anytime the need by date is picked. And then again, I can do a greater than date or something like that and just follow that exact same methodology out, set and clear validations.
Okay. So I can have multiple ones
Yes.
and
Yeah.
it will get called one after the other on change
Yeah.
of that value. Okay.
Yeah. And I'll show you that really quickly just because we have some that are already built out
Okay.
like that. So let me think about maybe the first one right here. Um, flows. And for everyone that's just joining, I see we got a full house. Please feel free to put something in the chat or the QA. We're going to be kind of keep rocking here for a moment, but as soon as more questions come up, we can kind of help them out. So on this one, Smith, we have a couple of different active form flows on here that validate different things for different reasons. Um, so we need a couple on here. One is, hey, the departure date needs to be at least 7 days in the future. So you like this is for a travel request.
Mhm.
You can't submit, hey, I need to leave tomorrow. It's going to give you validation. Also, we need the return date to be less than the departure date because you can't return before you left, essentially. So the return date, I guess that probably needs to be greater than the departure date. But essentially, you don't want to have you leave tomorrow and you return last week. We don't have time traveling capacity here decision. So as we kind of rock this through, I'm going to turn on I'll turn on I'll just debug it outright. Yeah, I'll just debug it outright. So as I go through here, if I set this departure date for tomorrow, it's going to give me this kind of yellow, which we just have as a warning here. But it does run that flow right here. Like it does run that. And now if I go, okay, this is a round trip, but I'm actually leaving on the 29th now, it will rerun that. Notice how it's green instead of red. And then I can set a return date. If I try to set this return date before the 29th, it's going to give me a validation because it ran that separate active form flow right here that does the date.
Okay,
So it's just having multiple active form flows is going to give you a lot more of a scalable and easy to traverse build design for you rather than having one massive flow where you constantly have to think about, well, if they change this value, now we need to reset this one. If they change that, just kind of separate them all out and have them as kind of individual triggers that run individual flows would be my recommendation.
perfect.
Cool. I'll keep rocking. And again, if I see we did have one more new one in the QA, um, and we'll just do one more Smithers, and then we might come back to your last one, Smithers, so we can balance everybody out.
Sure.
Is there a tooltip to display instructions on the form? Just because I think that one's going to be kind of a quick one here. Yeah, you have a handful of options. And when you say like a tool tip, you mean like when you hover over it, it tells you what to do, or do you mean
Yeah.
something in this world, like because this could be an option for you as well, something like this. Place your name here.
Uh, I think anything will work, but if they hover over, what'll happen if I put, if there is a warning message, what happens then? That also comes when we hover over, right?
Correct. When you hover over it, the warning message comes up. So I might recommend this watermark,
Okay.
just so you're not balancing all of that stuff. You could always put instructions, in just straight text format on the form somewhere, which maybe isn't the best for everybody, but I think for some users, depends on what they're doing. Just having a label saying, "Hey, here's how you're going to fill this out." But something that's kind of smooth and built in is just this watermarking process. So if you click a
Right.
label, you could say, "Item to purchase, please." List one item only. And then as you see it right there, but it is kind of another good kind of user
Okay.
experience here
Great. I
where
think one of
that
these will work. Mhm.
cool. Yeah, and I have that locked in, so that's not actually the best.
Sure.
Let me just for YouTube's sake, let me unlock that control. Um,
Behavior.
behavior enabled. And I'm going to get rid of that pre-population here, and then we will move on. We'll do Alexander's, and then we will jump right back and we'll finish up your question. But just so I can get everybody um, in a timely fashion and just to bring closure to this question. When I debug now, I have that kind of text list that will disappear as I start typing.
Sure.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. There's a specific help on hover. VT, you want to give me a quick, just so I can bring that full circle? Help on hover. Is it, where's that at on here? Is it under behavior probably? You got to give it to me quick though, because we are.
Yeah, it's the help message key right there. If you type something in there, I think you can use it as like a
Oh,
help, and you can pick help message key. Yeah.
thank you. So right there, that's saying the help message key right here will work a similar functionality. So even I am learning while I lunch here. Maybe not in the debug though. we'll revisit it just so we can kind of get our rhythm going here. So we got another quick question from Alexander. We got a couple more, it looks like, in the QA. Perfect. Love all these questions, y'all. Thank you. I will unmute you while I read the question. I see there's two of you in here. I'm not sure which one, so I'm just gonna unmute you both. Um, I think I unmuted you both. I'm gonna read the question out loud, and then you can bring any clarity you'd like. So, the question that I got that most of you on the other side of the line can't read is, hello, how I was wondering how you do an autofill data grid based on data pulled at the start of the flow and populate that form with data, and also how that data to be editable. Um, I think I got it there. Is there anything I need to clarify, or is there anything you want to tell me about your use case where I can maybe make sure I'm hitting the mark there? I see you're unmuted, but I can't hear you. Oh, hover over the text border. Yeah, I see you're unmuted, but I can't.
I think you'd be able to hear me now, right?
Yeah, you sound great. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, sorry, I wrote that up really quickly.
Oh, that's
Essentially,
all good.
I have data pulling at the beginning of a flow, and then at some point I have a form pop up. And the ask currently is, can we auto populate the data grid where they would normally go in and select objects, or like search for a thing for something and then add it to the data grid. But now, instead they want data to kind of auto populate inside of that grid, but also be editable for
Yeah,
their use case.
yeah, I think we do. And I know for sure we have some of this stuff on the YouTube from the past couple days, but I'll do a quick build out for you.
Okay.
Just because I don't have, I just installed this instance or this version 8 for a specific project, so I have no data on this. So I'm going to have to fetch a built-in kind of framework data um, here,
Okay.
fetch entities, unfortunately, just because I have nothing.
I
Uh,
understood how to do that with the autocomplete on, you know, regular text box and such, but data grid, I don't know why, I just couldn't get it to work.
Yeah, it can be a little tricky, and especially with the edit options and stuff, but we can definitely just figure it out together. That is for sure. All right, pick or create form. So let's just say no results. We're gonna go to the end. I know I have accounts, but um oh, it has to be configured in system settings. I'm not sure. And Jeremy, I'm assuming you're giving insight more to that help key thing. Just kind of triple balancing here. All right, pick or create form. We're gonna create a new one here. And you said you're using a data grid, an advanced data grid, probably.
That is correct.
Cool, man. Um, Yeah, so I would recommend the advanced data grid. I know we have data grid as an option as well. Um, I would recommend the advanced version. It's going to give you just more control. Especially if you're doing something outside just representing data, advanced data grid is going to be your best. Once you select it, you'll have to select the type. So again, based on what your type is, right? So obviously you're not using a count. Um, it looks like I'm not using a count either. There it is. Obviously you're going to want to match this to whatever you're fetching earlier in the process. You have to give it a name. So I'm going to call this just for connection points.
Now
Alex,
the
yes, sir.
type is kind of like the style, right? Like what the form, like what the data coming through is going to look like what
Yeah,
fields it's going to contain, things like that, right?
correct.
The
Yeah. So
structure.
yeah, if you have it built into a like a decision structure,
Hmm.
any of the data structures here in decisions, you'll name that. I can show you that on maybe another one here in a moment. Or if you just, hey, I know I'm pulling a bunch of strings, I know I'm pulling whatever. I do know that within a data grid advanced, it does need to be a complex type. So if you're just pulling strings or just pulling dates, this is probably not going to be your best option,
But
but
I'm passing a structure through.
cool. Yeah, so you'll name that structure. And I just call this Alex fetch names. I just want to show you the connection point. This input data name, this is what shows up outside of your flow so that you know what you're mapping in there. So again, I can pick this and go, okay, I want these entity results from my lovely fetch entities, and I am fetching it. Now, in its current iteration, it's not going to show us any data at all. So if I just go and run this, if I just go and run this, it is not going to show me anything. It might even give me an error because there's no path out of it, no data display. Why is that? because you need to actually go through and populate what data is going to be on that report. So we'll get to editing and all that later. But when you hit the source option for the advanced data grid, it'll say, okay, and I had no fields, which is why it wasn't showing me anything. But as I add these fields, and these will populate based on the name of that structure that you picked right here. So again, that should populate right there. I can add, and I'm just going to kind of go through some of these. I don't really have many accounts on here because I just installed this on Friday. But we can put email address. We can put, I think there's like a user type, which tells you whether or not they're a robot. I always like that. There we go. Why is this blank? Because it's not, it doesn't have any context of the fetch entities before it. That's why this is blank in its current iteration. Now I know I have accounts because you're kind of just making a blank template which can then be populated, because on your fetch entities, remember, you have the ability to add fetch criteria to limit that down before you hit that report. So you might want to say, hey, on this data grid, I only want to show accounts where the created on date was before a certain day or whatever the thing might be, or it was created by a certain person. So you're given options to parse it down there. Let's add a button here, and then we can kind of start talking about some of the maybe the edit functionalities if that's where we need to go to. But now that I've done this, save them. When I debug, it'll show whether they are a person or a machine, which is my favorite way to show accounts. Yeah, person is an account. I guess I imported a project that had these accounts already built in, so that's why I see some random Gmails in there. Cool. Okay, so that gets us to one point. Let's figure out where we're at and maybe readdress here. So what else? Where else do we need to go? You said you want to talk about maybe editing it in some capacity?
Yes, users should be able to delete them and remove them,
Okay,
or essentially change any kind of number on there.
sure. So this is going to be a multi-section uh, setting you're gonna have to change. I do also want to highlight, just because I remember I did this not that long ago. Well, maybe it was super long ago at this point. Um, yep, 5 months ago. Wow, been here a long time. I'll put this in the chat for you, but just so you have a follow-up, I did make a video on this exact thing 5 months ago. But it'll be an easier follow along than kind of trying to parse through me rambling on this lunch and learn later. But this is me walking through this process that I'm about to walk through with you. And again, here's that multiple that I was just alluding to. You need to set the editability in two places. So it's going to be on the data field properties and on the properties of the report itself. And I'll kind of show you that here as well. So here we are. So let's talk about editable. First, you want to turn your grid mode to inline edit. Info only is going to do exactly what it says it's going to do. It's going to show you the info only. If I go to inline edit, it will appear to give you the option to edit, but if I debug, I'm still locked in, no edit options. I can delete. As you saw, I was given the option to delete. I'll do that one more time. We'll talk about other options for that as well, but I could delete these, which I choose not to at this moment. Okay, great. So the two places that we need to mess with this at on this form. One, we turned on inline edit. Number two, we need to make the report in itself editable. So I always forget which one of these it is. Is it under, good thing I have this YouTube video up. It's under grid view. Maybe not on this iteration here. But on the field itself, like let's say email address, for sure you have the button that says can edit right here. So if I click on user type, I see user type, I can edit, email address, can edit. Let me check one more time here. Maybe things have changed or I was on a different version back then. In data field properties, editable on the properties of the report itself. Okay, let's just see what we got. If we're wrong, we can fix it. I am kind of flying pretty quick here. So I'm fetching, and I can edit these fields because I picked that field to be editable. This one I cannot edit because I did not pick it to be editable. Um, so those will let me edit those right there. So that's that bit. Let's read the question again. Populate that data and allow that data to be editable. Another thing just to keep in mind, or just a point to let you know, is with those data grids, you are given options over here for add and remove buttons, which will correlate with those data grids. So, these buttons should work with these, but I have not done a ton
How
of
did
that. So,
you how
yep.
did you pass the data through to the form itself? Did
So I
you get an input on the form?
Yep. So I fetched it.
Okay.
And then I have an input to the form. When you go through and you select what type of account you have, or sorry, what type of structure you have, as
Hmm.
soon as you do that, it'll give you this input data name here.
Okay.
And I could just call this anything, apples. And that kind of gives me like the socket, or like the opening, the funnel to put that, the apples, to put those entity results into.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Uh,
you.
yeah, no problem. Does that answer all your questions regarding
Yeah.
that?
Yeah,
Cool.
that's everything.
Cool. Keep rocking then. Thank you guys, everyone.
Thank you
Oh,
much.
sorry. Yeah, you're welcome. Sorry, Manal, we missed the question. I'm going to kind of read it anyways, just for everybody. Is there an option to create a scheduled job that sends reminders and runs every day and will stop on a certain day? Or that would be a validation rather than a job? We'll gladly cover it again tomorrow, but just so I can clear it out of my conscience. Yes, there are scheduled jobs. Version 8 and version 9 are going to look slightly different. But under scheduled jobs, you're given a lot of options for new scheduled flow. You can set it up to run daily. You can set it up to end on a certain day. All of those things can be done here in scheduled jobs. So if Manal chooses to watch this video later, apologies we couldn't get it to you in time. Um, but there's that. Um, Cool. So we answered those questions. We've been kind of rocking. Does anyone else have any more questions? If not, we're going to kind of go back to one of the Smith questions, but I think I just want to make sure that everyone that took the time to show up today, um, everyone that took the time to show up today got a chance to get their questions answered. So any other questions from the chat in any capacity? If not, we'll kind of jump back and we'll finish up that last one for Smitha. Related to exposing a flow, I think was the question. I'll have to reread it because we've been rocking here. All right, we'll go back to it. So Smitha, and again, anyone, feel free to just add to it. This has been an enjoyable process for me. So just,
Sure. Um,
yeah,
what
what was the,
we are what we're trying to do is, I think in one of your lunch and learns, you were showing that we can use for a flow, we can use the interface right on top to expose it to the users if we don't want this designer to be exposed to them.
yeah,
That works. So, but what we are trying to ask is what's the best way if we have a lot of flows, couple of reports, etc., to expose it to the users. So, one of the things is like what we noticed is after a flow is completed, right? You click the cancel button or something, we need to redirect it somewhere. Otherwise, it goes back to the designer. It says, portal complete or something like that. Even if we use the URL and the user does everything using the URL, when you hit the cancel or something, depending on where your flow goes, we want it to go to a landing page or like a pages or something like that. So the question is, what is the best way to achieve that?
yeah. And anyone on this side of the line, Gregory, Jeremy, or Gregory, Jared, feel free to fill in a little bit, but I'm gonna show you what I think immediately. You were saying that you knew how to pull up the URLs for
Correct. Yes, yes, yes. I know how to I think one of you was showing, in one of the lunch and learn. So I learned it from that. So yes, I know that.
Okay, cool. So what I might recommend, and this may be not the best one, so again, I think Jared or Gregory, if you guys have a better concept than that, what you can do is on that path for cancel, which I added a kind of a clunky button there too. Um, you can use inform session, and rather than displaying a message, you can open a URL and then place that URL so that when they hit cancel, it will send them to that URL. That might be not the smoothest option if anyone else has some input on there. for maybe some other workaround, but that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
If you're using an integration and like people, you give them like a guest URL link and then they complete it and they always get navigate back to like the login page or try to log in or whatever. What you can do to just, if they run a flow and just shows an end form, you'd have to create your own custom pick or create end form in that scenario. In other scenarios, what Robert suggested with the end form session will work. But if you're doing specifically an integration and it ends and it has this default, open designer for because flow completed, you just have to use a pick or create end form and create your custom end form, and then you won't have that prompt.
Okay, but will this problem be solved with, so this is what you're telling me, pick or and create and form, okay?
Mhm.
And here I specify the URL, what we are using initially.
So this one's different. This one won't give you a URL to navigate to. I mean, you can put a custom one inside the form. There's
Yeah.
several controls inside the pick or create end form to do. But if you just want a simple one that has that, like if you want to open up this, Robert, and just kind of show the like URL navigation tools, controls that we have on forms, you can still mimic the same behavior. It's just not default like in the end form session.
Yeah, and they'll have to click, right? We're talking about in that world.
Yeah, well, you can just go to data, like go to like open URL or something. Just search for it.
Okay.
Could be wrong. Maybe there's no URL control.
Oh,
Okay,
open
I
URL.
thought there was, yeah. And you could put a button and then send them to somewhere.
Something like that.
Okay, great, I can try that. But what is the advantage of using this versus using pages? When exactly do we use pages? Can we expose that also to the user like a URL kind of a thing?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, we have not done this in a little bit. Let me see if I can make a quick page real fast and see if I can work my way through it. I'm going to keep this very simple here just because I don't have any real data on here. We'll just show a mega scarf, the world's biggest scarf. Wow. Love that. Yeah, so I have to remember. Uh,
I'm just asking, like, is page better or exposing like that, like a form? We might have a lot of links, right? Like going navigating. So is using page better? And when you're calling multiple flows, you want a home landing page and they should be in a position to be able to go to any flow they want. So what
yeah,
do you suggest?
If you're
I think
utilizing if you're utilizing if you're gonna know you're gonna have like a website, kind of like think of any website that has different links that people can click on to go to different parts of the system, then yeah,
Yeah.
you'd use a dashboard and just have different landing page
right.
actions to it. That's one of the paradigms that dashboards are used for.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, almost set it up like a little, yeah, like a web page. You could have
Yeah.
buttons
Simple
up
tiles.
here, yeah,
Yeah, simple
tiles.
tiles
Mhm.
can I think it's like simple tiles or simple tile. Both of them on the step inside of them, you can set up that tile to be an action, meaning if a user left clicks on that, it will navigate them somewhere else. It will run a flow. It will, kind of do whatever your
Okay.
hearts can think of.
Maybe
Yeah,
that's what we need. So how can I go to that?
Page designer, simple tile.
Okay.
yeah, or yeah, you could use buttons as well if it's just a simple URL. Um, you could just put a button saying, "Hey, every time I click this, I want to go to Wikipedia." I know that's not what you want to do, but in that world. But yeah, if you're going to have them, in my opinion, a good customer experience would be through a dashboard rather than showing them a form with a bunch of links and stuff, and it would be a little more scalable as well across all the devices. Now, forms are generally going to be scalable across all the devices, but you don't want to give them a form that shows up on an iPhone and then every little link is, smaller than an eraser on a pencil, and it's just too small.
Okay. So when you say dashboard, is that a specific option?
To navigate to a specific dashboard.
Is this, when you say a dashboard, is that a separate option or is it in the pages?
So a dashboard and a page are um, uh, components that live within each other. They're almost
Okay.
synonymous. So a page is kind of the designer side of a dashboard. A dashboard depends on which version you're using. There's a couple different in 9, you want to put it in public folders. I'll say, are you on 9 or are you on 8?
9.
Okay, on 9. So I don't have a quick 9 I can get into right now. But essentially it's going to be a similar process what I'm about to show you, but you have to go into this public folder up here towards the top section. You can right click on it, and then you'll be given the option for folder. In version 8 or below, you can just kind of create a folder anywhere, but in 9, I just want to specify you got to be in the public folder to show that
Okay.
option. You create a folder, and I'll just create this at root, and I'll call this. So again, synonymous isn't the right word, but they're components that live within each other. So once I create a folder, and you'll create a folder in your public folder up there, you can go down here to manage page/dashboard, add a
Oh,
page, and then when you can select that page that you made, and now this is going to look like a website that does the
okay.
things.
Okay. And how can I get the URL? It says expose page to give it to somebody.
Yeah. Would it be under integration details there, Jared?
Yeah.
For the
Yeah, on
URL?
the folder. Yeah, on the folder side.
Yep. Yeah, so on your folder, you're going to right click and go to integration, view integration details, and you can set up how people get permissions, either
Sure.
logging in as a guest, named session. But I would definitely be aware of who is accessing this and the way that you position your permissions. I hesitate to give you too much advice on that because it just is a little bit of a security thing. And I know that we on the Lunch and Learn side, we try to stay away from advising too much on or just anything that might compromise your user data. You just have to be aware of who's using it and how they're using it, and run testing just to make sure that your data is secure to the only people you want to see it.
Okay.
And what I can do as well is I'll show you on documentation real fast before I jump over and help answer one of James' question. If you go in here and type in integration settings, it'll just give you a little bit of information about how those integration settings might work. And I think I'm actually on the wrong one here. View integration details, maybe? Yep, this is the one you want. View integration details. So it'll talk to you a little bit about how these things work, all the different kind of controls, what logging in, what guest, what named session, specify user credentials, and I'll put that in the chat for you as well.
Thank you so much.
Jeremy added a great point on the side of on Page Designer. You're also given a good option rather than running a URL, and I did know that, but I just didn't hit my brain in the right time. Let's find that project again, and then James will jump on over.
Okay. This date record is not.
You're talking on the mic, Jared. Oh, the page. Yeah. So rather than having to call that URL, Samantha, you can also just run a flow from here and pick a flow just like you've always picked flows in options. And so like I can pick or create flow, I can pick an existing flow, and I can run this flow as a button. But notice how it's a link. If I change it to button up here, let me change it to straight button. It runs like that, or you can do an image button. Say if they ever click this raft, it'll run the flow, however you want to do it. And that button can be customized as well. So if you go to image button right here, you can also just make it from a file. So if you have like specific branding stuff for your organization, you can use those kind of buttons and stuff in a pretty quick and easy way.
Sure. Cute.
All right, let's go and we'll do James. Question on custom end form. What happens if you have just a message and the done button? Will it then go back to decisions? I'm assuming you're talking about from the end user experience. I'm going to unmute you. You're talking about like an end user, one of the students that are going through it. They hit this end form, they hit done. Where does it navigate to?
Yeah, I think it probably would. It'll give you the same, probably navigate, just like if you just ended the flow.
Yeah, I think you can specify. Let's mess with it, man. I think you can specify.
Because I had a question last week that concerned, can I somehow tell where they're coming from so I can send them back to that page? Because we're going to need to do that at some point.
Ooh, maybe flow data.
I did. Oh, James, I forgot to email you. I did find the answer to that. I talked to one of the core devs. He says we don't have that. There's no way we can get that
Okay.
information for it. So I'm sorry, I forgot to follow up with you, but I did find
Okay.
that out.
Okay. So in decisions, there's no way when they link into decisions to tell where they're like a URL that they're coming from.
Correct. Yeah, there's no way in
Okay.
our code base that shows that information of
Gotcha.
like, like James clicked on it from an email or Jared clicked on it from,
Right.
some other system,
But
unfortunately.
if I set it up that way to capture that on the back end or on their end and send it along as a parameter, I could do something like that, correct?
Yeah, that would work.
Yeah.
Yeah. That we might have to build that into our stuff because they're going to have some links within our ERP system that they're coming from. I'm
Mhm.
going to want to send them back to that link once
Sure.
we're done with the decisions part. We want it to be seamless, so where they don't even know really that they left the system. They just pop out there, do their stuff, and pop back in.
Sure, it makes sense. You probably would have to have I think it would be multiples of the same flow, right? Just that there would be like some create data step with a string that says if someone used this link, this one's from the email,
Correct.
and then we'll send them there. And then if someone used this from ERP, then it sends them
Right,
there.
right,
But yeah,
yeah. We would
that would
build
do it.
like a rule set or something like that, maybe.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. And I think as far as that info, because right now our biggest thing is we do not want them ending up in decisions, no matter
Right.
what.
Yeah.
Want them ending up there. So we don't want that, that standard message that comes up when you're done with the flow. It just, when you click on it, it puts you back in decisions. We don't want that. So I guess what we could do with an end session is just like not allow them to do anything, and they just have to click off the tab of the browser, basically, to go anywhere. Just end it.
Yeah, I
You
would.
don't know where to send them, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, and your sentiment is right. You don't want them just landing on some weird, what is this login decisions navigate?
Yeah, they won't know what's going on.
Yeah.
It's a bad experience. They don't know
Right.
what that message is. They might
Yeah.
think they had an error of some sort. They're
Yeah.
gonna get calls.
Yeah.
So
I would.
just want to
Yeah,
avoid
I
that.
would play around with some of this stuff. I'm trying to think of another way that would like silo your whole operation off that maybe isn't through the end form session, but maybe the way they access the flows. But I'm kind of still brainstorming that on how
Yeah,
you could silo shell it off so that like, hey, this is the only experience they have is from this point to this
right,
point. They don't even,
right,
know that the stuff really exists outside of that.
right. Yeah.
Let me think for a
What we
moment.
do right now is I just send them to our university's homepage.
Yeah.
Um, or if I know it's a specific process that comes like say a web page or something, they're clicking on a link, then I can send them back to that web if I know ahead of time that's where it came from.
Yeah.
But I have to know that ahead of time. That's the only gotcha with what I want to do in the future.
Something I'd
But
have to
yeah,
think on, and I'd have to you'd have to also kind of do a little bit of UI debugging, open incognito window, open in one browser, check it in Edge,
yep,
check it in Chrome, check it in
yep.
Mozilla, because as soon as you get into that URL game,
Mhm.
just different browsers are going to respond differently. That's just the reality
Mhm.
of it. So
Yeah,
try it on mobile, all that stuff. It's going to be a little bit of a UI debug troubleshooting process, but um, I'm still thinking, is there a way you could just silo it off? But it's not, nothing is
yeah.
resonating right now.
I'm thinking if I get stumped and I don't know where they came from, I'll just put up a standard end form session that basically has no button on it. It just says thank you for your
Yeah.
whatever, and then
Mhm.
the only way out of it is you close the tab.
Yeah. I do wonder if anyone else. Oh, look, we got our own stuff on here. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of experiences in my life, like maybe going through like TurboTax or something where they're like, you are done, nowhere else to go but
Yeah,
turbotax.com.
yeah, yeah.
Like,
I mean,
yeah,
they do that
yeah,
on like certain company sites. I
yeah,
guess they would, but typically there's a link back to their homepage or
right,
something, or back
yeah,
to where you came from, or something like that. And
yeah, and you could give them options on that informed session of like, hey, these are your only options.
yeah, yeah,
And then
definitely. Yeah,
following even up on those, you know, yeah, that's probably your best. But
yeah,
yeah, and as I'm sure I would just advise doing that debug through browsers and Chrome and
Yeah, yeah, we did.
logged in,
We
not
did a
logged
bunch of
in
that
because,
at-
yeah.
when we did that, and we just found you definitely have to have the whole URL that you
Mhm.
wanted, including HTTP,
HTTPS. Yep.
and all
Yeah, for
that
sure.
stuff in your
Yeah.
link.
Yeah, because there's some websites,
That
even
seems
some
to
stuff
work.
on our end, like that I've got myself into a bit of a headache before because I would type in, certain prefixes to a website that I couldn't use or didn't need, or you can't type in whatever the thing is. So yeah, it is
Mhm.
very specific.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, I think that does it. Now, as far as the knowing where they came from thing, we'll have to work that out internally
Mhm.
when we do the actual link out to decisions. We'll have to do it, I guess, through an API, or I don't know if
Yeah.
within that standard integration, you can specify a POM too. Not sure how that works.
Yeah, I don't have the architectural background for that one. I would
Yeah.
look into, I'm sure there's there's a service, I'm sure you don't want to pay for it, but I'm sure there's a service that does some type of rerouting that'll map it in, and then it gives you an API call that you could then reference in the flow. But then you're kind of you're doing a lot of building, um, for
Yeah, I'm
a,
just wondering, like in that, when you get what I do now is I give them a link that
yep.
basically is built out of the flow, when you do the integration part. I build that integration and give them that link. I wonder, is there any way on that link to put parameters into your flow when they call it as well? Because all it's doing is building a bunch of, you know, parameters for the Chrome off, Chrome, all that stuff after
Yeah.
you actually link into it with flow name. Is there ways that Decision will accept other parameters? Or do I have to build like an API type thing, call the flow?
That is a good question.
Because at the end of the day, this is all this is coming up with a link that I would
Yeah.
think you could add parameters to. It's just whether that flow would be able to read those parameters.
Yeah, you can.
Right.
So when you create integrations and decisions for certain things, you can add the brackets and the parameters for it. Or
Cool.
you can just craft that. If you know what the URL is, like, right, you see folder ID, I can craft that URL to get to that specific location on the fly if I need to.
Right. Yeah.
It's just a truth table and then just kind of building out that string.
So couldn't the URL hypothetically have a section that says newsletter, and he'll know that if that was the URL call, they came from the newsletter kind of thing? I think that's what his end goal is. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I was walking on the wrong
No, it
street.
is. It's so
Yeah,
that
okay.
when I craft the link coming into decisions from wherever they're linking from, I can build that parameter, that specific parameter into it, because I'll know from that ERP system or wherever they're coming from,
Well,
what it is.
you could, or just have three flows. One comes from ERP, one comes from an email, right? It's the same
Mhm.
flow, but then you have a create data step that outputs, right, where user came from.
Right.
And so that would just be in that you'd have the same flow copy that does the same function.
Mhm.
It's just the status or like the location that comes out of that step would be different based on what was clicked. And then you could probably have that with like a runtime selection that like, hey, based on that, this flow was ran.
Right. Yeah, you can do that. Yeah. Or I could just have a truth table within the flow that sends them out, right?
You can do
Yeah.
that too.
I mean, to me, that would be the better. I mean, because that way I can expand that truth table without having to worry about creating different flows if the situation changed or if there was
True.
additional things.
Very true.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I'll work on that aspect.
Give me one more second to look up something, and then I'm going to close it out for everybody here, just because we're out of time here. BT, where's where'd that option be, man? If you don't mind giving me a little bit of insight. Close window. Is that a step that I'm not familiar with? And I got a million tabs open at this point. Close window. We'll check one more thing here, James, for you, just because so VT's it on end form session step. Close window. I mean, that's
Yeah.
so
I think that
thank you.
still takes you back. I think I tried that before. Maybe it's changed, but I think that just basically does the same thing. It does
Sure.
close the window, but I
Where
don't know if
to?
it closes that. I'll have to try that, but I forget.
Yeah.
It's been a long time, but I think I've tried that before. Maybe that'll work though.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you guys, everybody. We really got after it today. We did probably 7, 8, 9 questions. I don't know. And I got a lot of help. I learned a little bit too. So Appreciate everybody for joining. Thank you guys again. We have another great one tomorrow. I believe it is Mr. Jeremy Linwinwitz. So here's our squad for the week for those of you that are interested. We will see you guys tomorrow. Thank you again. Super appreciative. Enjoy the rest of y'all's day.